Have you ever wondered what happens when a person who has everything loses it all? Not just money or fame, but an entire kingdom. Today, we're diving deep into the life of one of history's most legendary figures, King Solomon. We all know him as the wisest man who ever lived, the builder of the magnificent temple, the king who presided over Israel's golden age. His reign was the stuff of legends and paralleled peace, prosperity, and influence. But there's a dark turn in his story, a cautionary tale that echoes through the ages, and it all pivots on a single, powerful verse from the Bible. 1 Kings 11, verse 11. So the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this has been your attitude and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you." Just imagine hearing those words. This isn't just a political setback. This is a divine judgment. God himself is speaking. And he's not just disappointed. He is declaring the end of an era. The unified kingdom of Israel, the legacy of his father David, the very symbol of God's promise, is going to be torn apart. And what? The verse tells us, "Since this has been your attitude and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees." To truly grasp the weight of this moment, we need to rewind. Let's go back to the beginning of Solomon's reign. He was young, humble, and when God offered him anything he wanted, what did he ask for? Solomon's early years were a testament to his obedience and his reliance on God. He built the temple, a breathtaking structure that took 7 years to complete, and dedicated it to the Lord in a powerful public prayer. Israel flourished. It was a time of unprecedented peace and prosperity. It seemed like the dream would last forever, but slowly, subtly, things began to change. Solomon's story is a classic example of what I call success decay. It is when the very blessings we receive become the seeds of our downfall if we are not careful. Solomon amassed great wealth, horses, and chariots, directly going against the commands for a king laid out in Deuteronomy. But his most significant misstep, the one that led directly to our key verse, was his relationships. The Bible tells us he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. And here's a critical part. Many of these wives were from foreign nations, nations that worshipped other gods. Now, this wasn't just a matter of personal preference. God had explicitly warned the Israelites not to intermarry with these nations, because, as he said, they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. And that is exactly what happened. In his old age, Solomon's wives turned his heart away. The man who built the temple for the one true God began to build high places for Chemosh, the god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. This wasn't a one-time mistake. The verse says, "Since this has been your attitude." This points to a consistent pattern of behavior, a gradual drifting away from God. It was a heart problem. His attitude had shifted from one of humble dependence to one of self-indulgent compromise. He started to believe his own hype. He thought he could have it all God's blessing on the world's pleasures. He thought he was the exception to the rule, but no one is. And that brings us back to the judgment in 1 Kings 11:11. "I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you." The language here is so visceral. It's not, "it will slip away," or "it will be lost." It's tear away. It suggests a violent, painful separation. The unified nation, the pride of Israel, was going to be ripped in two. This wasn't just a political consequence. It was a spiritual one. It was the direct result of a broken covenant. A covenant is a sacred agreement, and Solomon had shattered it. In the very next verse, God adds a condition. "Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son." God's faithfulness to his promise to David, Solomon's father, provided a temporary shield. David was a man after God's own heart, and out of respect for that relationship, the full consequence was delayed. Enemies that had been subdued for decades, like Hadad the Edomite and Rezon in Damascus, began to rise up and stir trouble for Solomon. The cracks were already starting to show. "Antanteres, the second part of the judgment, and give it to one of your servants." This is the ultimate humiliation for a king. His kingdom won't just be lost. It will be handed over to a subordinate. God was raising up Solomon's replacement from within his own ranks. The power and glory that Solomon had taken for granted were being reassigned. It's a stark reminder that God gives, and God can take away. Our positions, our talents, our successes, they are all stewardships from him. So what's the takeaway for us today? We might not be kings or queens of a literal nation. It's so easy to start strong in our faith, full of passion and zeal, and then slowly, over time, let compromises creep in. Maybe it's letting small, seemingly insignificant disobediences build up until our heart grows cold. His story teaches us that true wisdom isn't just about knowing what's right. It's about consistently doing what's right. The fall of Solomon and the tearing of the kingdom is one of the great tragedies of the Bible. But it also shows us the steadfastness of God. Even in judgment, he remembers mercy. He didn't abandon his people entirely. The line of David would continue, leading eventually to a far greater king, Jesus, whose kingdom will never be torn apart and will have no end. Solomon's story is a call for us to do a heart check. Where is our allegiance? Is our devotion to God undivided? Are we nurturing our relationship with him? Or are we letting other gods, the idols of our age, turn our hearts away? Let's learn from the wisest man who ever lived, not just from his wisdom, but from his failure. Have you ever faced a moment where everything you've worked for, everything you believed was yours, was suddenly taken away? Imagine being a king, the rightful heir to a massive, unified kingdom, only to see it fracture right before your eyes. This isn't just a political drama. It's a profound story of ambition, division, and a surprising divine intervention. Today, we're diving into a short but incredibly powerful passage from the Old Testament, 2 Chronicles chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. It has a story about a king ready to go to war to reclaim his kingdom, and the one message from God that stopped an entire army in its tracks. Let's set the stage. King Solomon, the wise and wealthy ruler of Israel, has died. His son, Rehoboam, ascends to the throne. You'd think this would be a smooth transition, right? Far from Italiano, Rehoboam's arrogance and poor judgment immediately cause a crisis. The 10 northern tribes of Israel feel oppressed and unheard. They had pleaded with him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Instead of listening to wise counsel, Rehoboam consults his young, inexperienced friends and comes back with a harsh reply. "My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." As you can imagine, this did not go over well. The 10 northern tribes, led by a man named Jeroboam, rebel, they break away and form their own kingdom, which becomes known as Israel. Rehoboam is left with just 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, forming the southern kingdom of Judah. So, in an instant, the glorious, unified kingdom built by David and Solomon is shattered. This brings us to our main text, 2 Chronicles 11, verse 1. Rehoboam has returned to Jerusalem, the capital of his now diminished kingdom. What's his first move? Is it diplomacy? Is it soul-searching? Nope. It's to raise an army. The text says, when Rehoboam arrived in Jerusalem, he mustered the house of Judah and Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men, warriors to fight against Israel and to restore the kingdom to Rehoboam. 180,000 men. That is a massive army. Rehoboam is furious, humiliated, and determined to take back what he believes is rightfully his. He sees the northern tribes not as a separate nation, but as rebels who must be brought back into the fold, by force, if necessary. He is ready to plunge the nation into a bloody civil war. Brothers would be fighting against brothers, tribes against tribes. The very people of God were about to destroy each other. Think about the human emotions swirling around here. Pride, anger, a sense of injustice. Rehoboam felt entitled to the entire kingdom. His father was Solomon. His grandfather was David. In his mind, this rebellion was an unacceptable affront to his authority and his lineage. From a purely human, political perspective, his decision to go to war makes a certain kind of sense. He's a king, trying to maintain control and unity. He's not going to let a significant portion of his territory just walk away. But this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Just as the armies are gathering, Just as the drums of war are about to beat, God steps in. Verse 2 says, "But the word of the Lord came to Shemaiah, the man of God." Shemaiah is a prophet, a messenger for God, and the message he carries is stunningly counterintuitive. God tells Shemaiah to speak to Rehoboam and all the people of Judah and Benjamin. And here's the message in verses 3 and 4. This is what the Lord says: "Do not go up to fight against your brothers. Every man return to your home, for this matter is from me." Let that sink in. This matter is from me. God himself declares that he is the one behind this division. The splitting of the kingdom was unjust a political accident or the result of Rehoboam's foolishness, though that was certainly the human trigger. It was part of God's sovereign plan. God had prophesied this very split to Jeroboam years earlier through the prophet Ahijah as a judgment for Solomon's idolatry. Solomon had turned his heart away from God in his later years, and this division was the consequence. So, God's message to Rehoboam is clear. Stand down. Do not fight. This is my doing. You might think you're fighting against Jeroboam and the rebels, but if you go to war, you are actually fighting against me. Imagine being Rehoboam in that moment. You have 180,000 warriors ready to fight. Your pride is on the line. Your entire identity as the king of a united Israel is at stake. And then a prophet shows up and tells you to just go home, to accept the division, to accept the loss. Everything in your human nature would be screaming, "No, I have to fight. I have to reclaim what is mine." This is a critical moment of decision. Will Rehoboam listen to his own pride and the roar of his army, or will he listen to the quiet, authoritative voice of God delivered through his prophet? And this is the most remarkable part of the story. Verse 4 concludes with these incredible words. "So they listened to the word of the Lord and returned from going against Jeroboam to listen." Rehoboam, the arrogant king who wouldn't listen to the wise elders. The warriors, primed for battle and full of nationalistic fervor. The entire assembly of Judah and Benjamin, they all heard God's command and they obeyed. They turned around and went home. The civil war was averted. An unimaginable amount of bloodshed and devastation was prevented simply because they chose to obey God's word, even when it went against their own plans and desires. This is such a powerful lesson for us. How often do we find ourselves in situations where we feel wronged, where we feel like we need to fight to reclaim what we believe is ours? It could be in a relationship, a job, or even a dispute within a church or community. Our pride wells up, and we're ready to go to war. Metaphorically speaking, we assemble our arguments, our warriors, and prepare to fight for our rights, our reputation, our position. And in that moment, God's word often comes to us, just as it came to Rehoboam. It might not be a prophet appearing in person, but it might be a clear conviction from the Holy Spirit, a passage from Scripture that speaks directly to our situation, or the wise counsel of a godly friend. And the message is often the same. Stand down. This isn't your battle. Let it go. Forgive. Trust me. It's a hard message to hear. It goes against our every instinct for self-preservation and justice. But Rehoboam's example shows us the profound wisdom and blessing that comes from obedience. By choosing not to fight, he preserved the lives of his people and acknowledged God's sovereignty over his circumstances. He may have lost a part of his kingdom, but he gained peace and avoided fighting against God himself. It's also important to note what this passage doesn't say. It doesn't say the division was a good thing. It was a tragedy, a consequence of sin. God allowed it. He even orchestrated it as a judgment, but it still brought pain and separation. God forbade the civil war, but the division remained. Sometimes, in our lives, obedience to God doesn't magically fix the broken situation. Sometimes we have to live with the consequences of past mistakes, our own or others. But God's command is to navigate those consequences with grace, humility, and trust in Him, not with aggression and strife. The story of Rehoboam is a stark reminder that God's ways are not our ways. He sees the bigger picture that we can't. While Rehoboam saw rebellion to be crushed, God saw a necessary, albeit painful, step in His larger redemptive plan. By obeying Rehoboam, and the people of Judah aligned themselves with God's will, even though it meant accepting a diminished status and a divided nation. So, the next time you feel that urge to go to war in your own life, to fight for what you feel you deserve, take a moment to pause and listen. Is God speaking? Is he asking you to stand down? To trust him with the outcome? It may be the hardest thing you ever do. Have you ever felt like you were completely cornered with no way out? You're facing an impossible situation. An enemy so powerful that defeat seems inevitable. This was exactly the reality for King Hezekiah and the people of Judah. Imagine the scene. Jerusalem, the holy city, is surrounded. The mighty Assyrian army, the superpower of the day, led by the ruthless king Sennacherib, is camped outside the walls. They've already conquered nation after nation, and now they've set their sights on Judah. The psychological warfare is intense. Sennacherib's commander, the Rabshakeh, stands outside the city walls, shouting insults and threats in Hebrew so every citizen can understand. He mocks their faith in God, saying, "Don't let Hezekiah deceive you. Don't let him make you trust in the Lord by saying, 'The Lord will surely deliver us.'" He lists all the other gods of the lands he's conquered, gods who were powerless to save their people. The message is clear. You are next. Your God is no different. Surrender or be destroyed. He tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth, and goes to the temple to pray. He lays the whole situation bare before God. He doesn't sugarcoat it. God declares, "For I will defend this city and save it, for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David." Let's pause and really think about that. For my own sake and for the sake of my servant David. What does this mean? First, God says he will act for his own sake. This is about his name, his reputation, his glory. Sennacherib had not just threatened Judah. He had blasphemed the God of Israel. He had put the creator of the heavens and the earth on the same level as the man-made idols of the nations he decrushed. God was about to demonstrate, in a very dramatic way, that he is not just another God. He is the one and only God. His honor was on the line. When God acts to save his people, he is often vindicating his own holiness and power in a world that denies him. He was about to show everyone that he is the King of Kings, and that no earthly power can stand against him. But the second part of the verse is just as stunning. "And for the sake of my servant David." This is incredible. David, the great king of Israel, had been dead for nearly 300 years at this point. 3 centuries. Yet, God's promise to him was still active, still powerful, still shaping history. What was this promise? If we go back to Samuel chapter 7, we find the Davidic covenant. God promised David that his house, his kingdom, and his throne would be established forever. He promised that a descendant of David would always sit on the throne. This was a covenant, a binding agreement, initiated by God out of his love and grace for David. Now, hundreds of years later, when the heir to David's throne, King Hezekiah, and the city of David, Jerusalem, are on the brink of annihilation, God remembers his promise. He looks at the impossible situation. He hears the threats of the enemy, and he says, "I made a promise to David. I will not let it fail." This reveals something truly beautiful about God. His promises don't have an expiration date. His faithfulness transcends time, generations, and even the faithfulness of the people involved. Let's be honest. David's descendants were not always righteous kings. The history of Judah is a roller coaster of obedience and rebellion. But God's covenant was not based on their perfection. It was based on his character and his word. Hezekiah himself was a good king, one of the most righteous in Judah's history. But God's reason for salvation wasn't just Hezekiah's piety. It was rooted deeper in a promise made long ago to a man God called my servant. They were beneficiaries of a grace that was sealed generations before they were even born. And what happened next? The Bible tells us that very night, the angel of the Lord went out to the Assyrian camp and put to death 185,000 soldiers. One angel. One night, no battle, no fight. Sennacherib woke up to a field of corpses. He quietly packed up what was left of his once mighty army and went home to Nineveh, just as God had said. He was later assassinated in the temple of his own God. the very God he had boasted about. God not only defended Jerusalem for his own name's sake and for David's sake, but he did it in a way that left no doubt who was truly in control. It was a miraculous, undeniable act of divine power. Judah was saved because of a promise made to a long-dead king. So, how does this ancient story speak to us today? It speaks volumes, because just as God made a covenant with David, the entire Davidic covenant was ultimately pointing to Jesus. He is the ultimate king from David's line, whose kingdom will have no end. Hebrews chapter 8 tells us that Jesus is the mediator of a better covenant, established on better promises. We are saved not for our own sake, not because of our own righteousness or good deeds, because we all fall short. We are saved for his sake, and for the sake of his Son, Jesus. Think about it. When God looks at those who trust in Christ, he sees us through the lens of his Son. Just as God defended Jerusalem for David's sake, God defends, protects, and saves us for Jesus' sake. Our salvation, our security, our hope for eternity is not based on how well we perform. It is anchored in the finished work of Jesus on the cross and the unbreakable promise of God. When you feel cornered by life, when the enemy whispers lies of defeat and worthlessness, remembered those kings, 1934. Remember that God acts for his own glory and for the sake of his covenant promises. And the greatest promise is found in his Son. Your hope is not in your own strength, but in the fact that you belong to him. God has staked his own reputation on saving you, and he will do it for his own sake, and for the sake of his beloved Son, Jesus. Have you ever heard the saying, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall"? It's a line from the book of Proverbs, specifically 16:18, and it asks one of those ancient truths that feels just as relevant today as it did thousands of years ago. It's not just a religious warning. It's a profound observation about human nature. So, what does it really mean, and how can we see it playing out in our own lives and in the world around us? Pride, in this context, isn't about feeling good about an accomplishment or having some. That kind of pride is healthy. We're talking about a different beast. Arrogance, hubris, that feeling of superiority that makes you think you're better than everyone else. It's the kind of pride that makes you believe you're invincible, that the rules don't apply to you, and that you have all the answers. A haughty spirit is right there with it. It's that puffed-up attitude, looking down on others, being dismissive of advice, and refusing to listen to criticism. When pride and a haughty spirit take over, they act like blinders. They prevent you from seeing your own flaws and weaknesses. You stop learning, you stop growing, and you stop connecting with the people around you in a genuine way. You're essentially living in an echo chamber of your own greatness, and this is where the destruction and the fall come in. It's not necessarily a lightning bolt from the sky. More often, it's a gradual, self-inflicted process. When you're blinded by pride, you start making bad decisions. You might take on a project you're not equipped to handle because you cooey and admit you need help. You might alienate friends, family, or colleagues because you refuse to listen to their perspectives or apologize for your mistakes. You might ignore warning signs in your business or your personal life because you believe you're too smart to fail. Often, at the heart of their collapse, you'll find leaders who became arrogant. They stopped innovating because they thought they were untouchable. They ignored market shifts because they believed their way was the only way. Their pride made them rigid and blind, and eventually, their competitors, who were more humble and adaptable, surpassed them. The very thing that made them feel powerful there, pride became the seed of their downfall. It happens in personal relationships, too. An argument between partners can escalate when pride gets in the way. Instead of listening and trying to understand, one or both people dig in their heels, refusing to admit they might be wrong. I'm not apologizing first. That's pride talking. Over time, this refusal to be vulnerable and admit fault erodes trust and intimacy, leading to a breakdown of the relationship. The fall is the loneliness and regret that follows. Maybe you're too proud to ask for help with a difficult task at school or work. You struggle in silence. Your performance suffers, and you miss an opportunity to learn from someone else. Or perhaps you're too proud to admit you're struggling with your mental health. You put on a brave face, telling everyone you're fine, while inside you're falling apart. This prevents you from getting the support and help you truly need. Remember, Reaching out for help is a sign of incredible strength, not weakness. So, if pride is so dangerous, what's the antidote? It's humility. Now, humility isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. It asks the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your strengths, but also being acutely aware of your weaknesses. They don't need to be the smartest person in the room. They're happy to learn from everyone in it. When was the last time you admitted you were wrong? Who are the people in your life that you might be looking down on? Instead of formulating your rebuttal while they're talking, truly try to understand their point of view. Another great practice is to regularly try something new that you're not good at. Whether it's learning a musical instrument, a new language, or a sport, being a beginner is a humbling experience. It reminds you what it feels like to not know everything and to rely on others for guidance. It builds empathy. Finally, practicing gratitude is a direct counter to pride. When you focus on what you're thankful for, the help you've received, the opportunities you've been given, the people who support you, it's hard to feel arrogant. Gratitude reminds us that we don't achieve success in a vacuum. We are all interconnected and dependent on each other. The proverb, "Pride goes before destruction," isn't meant to be a scare tactic. It's a piece of wisdom, a guide for a better, more connected, and more sustainable way of living. It reminds us that our greatest strengths can become our greatest weaknesses if we're not careful. By choosing humility over pride, we choose growth over stagnation, connection over isolation, and long-term success over a short-lived, spectacular fall. It's about building a foundation on solid ground, not on the fragile pedestal of our own ego. So, let's all try to be a little more aware of our own pride. Let's be quicker to listen, slower to judge, and always open to learning. Because in the end, it's humility that keeps us grounded, helps us build lasting relationships, and allows us to navigate the ups and downs of life with grace and resilience. Have you ever been part of a team that just couldn't get on the same page? Maybe it was a group project in school where everyone had different ideas, or a sports team where players were more focused on their own stats than on winning the game. It feels frustrating, right? Things fall apart, goals aren't met, and everyone ends up discouraged. It's a universal truth that unity is strength, and division leads to weakness. This isn't a new idea. In fact, it was captured perfectly in a powerful statement made 2,000 years ago in the book of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 25. Jesus says, "Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand." This is such a profound and timeless piece of wisdom. Let's break it down because it applies to so much more than just ancient kingdoms. First, let's think about the kingdom. In today's world, a kingdom could be your country, your community, your workplace, or even your circle of friends. When a nation is torn apart by political infighting and social unrest, it becomes weak and vulnerable. Progress stalls, people souffle. We see this play out on the world stage all the time. A country where citizens are pitted against each other loses its strength and its ability to thrive. It can't effectively solve problems like poverty, healthcare, or education because all its energy is spent on internal conflict. Then, Jesus narrows it down to a city or house. This brings the principle right into our personal lives. Think about a workplace where departments are constantly competing instead of collaborating. Information is withheld, blame is shifted, and the entire company suffers. Productivity plummets, morale hits rock bottom, and talented people start looking for the exit. The house divided cannot stand. The business loses its competitive edge, not because of outside forces, but because of its own internal breakdown. And what about the most personal house of all? Our families. When a family is divided, the home is no longer a safe haven. Constant arguments, resentment, and a lack of support create an environment of stress and unhappiness. Communication breaks down. Trust erodes. The bonds that are supposed to be the strongest become the most fragile. A family divided against itself cannot provide the love, security, and encouragement that its members need to flourish. It's a heartbreaking reality for so many. So, what's the antidote to this division? It's unity. But unity isn't about everyone being the same or always agreeing on everything. That's not realistic. True unity is about having a shared purpose that is more important than our individual differences. It's about respect, empathy, and a willingness to listen and find common ground. Think back to that struggling sports team. What happens when they finally decide to put the team's success above their personal glory? They start communicating on the field, supporting each other's plays, and celebrating victories together. They become a cohesive unit, a force to be reckoned with. They build something stronger together than any one of them could alone. This same principle applies to our communities. When we stop focusing on what divides us and start looking for what unites us, a desire for safe streets, good schools, a vibrant local economy, we can start working together to make real change happen. It begins with small conversations, with listening to a neighbor who has a different perspective, and with finding a shared project you can both work on. And in our own homes, it means choosing to forgive. It means practicing active listening, trying to understand where the other person is coming from, even if you don't agree. It means remembering that you are on the same team, facing the world together. A unified family can weather any storm because its foundation is built on love and mutual support. The wisdom of a house divided cannot stand is a powerful reminder for all of us. It is a call to look at the kingdoms and houses in our own lives. Where is their division? Where is their conflict? And more importantly, what can you do to be a force for unity? It might mean being the first to apologize after an argument. It could mean actively seeking out a coworker from another department to collaborate on a project. It might be as simple as reaching out to a family member you haven't spoken to in a while. Every single act of reconciliation, every effort to bridge a divide, strengthens the foundation of our homes, our workplaces, and our communities. This ancient verse isn't just a warning, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to build, to connect, and to heal. It challenges us to be peacemakers in a world that is so often torn apart by conflict. Because when we stand together, we are not just preventing our houses from falling, we are building something beautiful, resilient, and strong enough to last. Let's choose unity. Let's build houses that'll stand. Thanks for watching today. If this message resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more reflections on timeless wisdom for modern life. Today, we're going to dive into a truly remarkable passage from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, verse 22. It says, "I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel. There will be one king over all of them, and they will never again be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms." Now, to truly grasp the weight of this promise, we need a little backstory. This is exactly what happened to the nation of Israel. After the reign of King Solomon, the nation fractured into two separate kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. This wasn't just a political split, it was a deep spiritual wound. They worshipped differently, they had different kings, and they were often at odds, sometimes even at war with each other. It was a national tragedy, a complete breakdown of the unity God had intended for his people. Then, things got even worse. Both kingdoms, because they turned away from God, were eventually conquered and sent into exile. The northern kingdom of Israel was scattered by the Assyrians, and later, the southern kingdom of Judah was taken captive to Babylon. They were not just divided from each other. They were now scattered among foreign nations, stripped of their land, their temple, and their identity. It est, in this context of utter hopelessness, that the prophet Ezekiel receives his famous vision of the Valley of Dry Bones, which we find just before our key verse. He is going to take the two divided, scattered, and broken pieces of his family and make them one again. And that's where our verse for today, Ezekiel 37-22, comes in. "I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel. There will be one king over all of them, and they will never again be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms." Let's break this incredible promise down. First, I'll make them one nation. Notice who is doing the work here. It's God. It's not a political treaty or a human effort. The division was too deep, the wounds too old for human hands to heal. Only God himself could perform this miracle of reunification. He is the one who will gather his scattered people from all the nations where they've been exiled and bring them back together. Second, in the land, on the mountains of Israel. This isn't just a spiritual unity. It's a physical restoration. God promises to bring them back to their homeland, the land he had originally given them. This speaks of a restored identity, a sense of belonging, a place to call home once again. Through the cross, people from every tribe, nation, and language are brought together into one family, one body, with one King Jesus. We are the living fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecy. So, if you're feeling divided today, if you're looking at a broken relationship, a fractured community, or even the conflict within your own heart and thinking, this is hopeless. Remember the valley of dry bones. Remember the two sticks joined into one. Remember God's powerful promise, I will make them one. He is the God of impossible restoration. He is the one who gathers the scattered, heals the broken, and unites the divided under the perfect rule of our King, Jesus. This isn't just an old story. It's a living promise for you and for me, right here, right now. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this powerful passage. Have you ever felt like you're part of something bigger than yourself? A team, a family, a community where everyone is united for a single purpose. It's a powerful feeling, right? Well, today, we're going to dive into a story from thousands of years ago that perfectly captures this very idea. It's a moment of incredible unity and purpose, found in the book of 1 Chronicles, chapter 11, verse 1. The verse reads, Then all Israel gathered themselves to David at Hebron, saying, Behold, we are your bone and your flesh. Now, let's unpack that. All Israel gathered themselves to David at Hebron. This isn't just a small committee meeting. This is an entire nation coming together. Imagine the scene. People from every tribe, from all corners of the land, traveling to the city of Hebron. This wasn't a command. It was a collective decision, a movement of the people. They gathered with one heart and one mind. Why? Because they saw something special in David. This leads us to the second part of the verse. Behold, we are your bone and your flesh. This is such a profound and intimate statement. It's more than just saying, we're on your side. It's a declaration of deep kinship and shared identity. They were telling David, you are one of us. Your struggles are our struggles. Your triumphs are our triumphs. We are connected to you on the most fundamental level. To really appreciate the weight of this moment, we need a little backstory. Before this, Israel was a fractured kingdom. After the death of its first king, Saul, there was a period of civil war and division. The tribe of Judah had already made David their king, but the rest of the nation, the northern tribes, had followed Saul's son. For years, there was conflict and disunity. So, this gathering at Hebron isn't just a political coronation. It's a healing. It's the mending of a broken family. The people had experienced the pain of division, and now they were actively choosing unity. They had watched David's leadership, his character, and his heart for God, even when he was a fugitive hunted by King Saul. They had seen his military victories and his integrity. They recognized that he was the leader God had chosen for them all along. The phrase bone and flesh echoes an even older story in the Bible, the creation of Eve, from Adam's side. It signifies a relationship that is inseparable, foundational, and meant to be. By using this language, the people of Israel were saying to David, our destiny is tied to yours. We belong together. This wasn't just about political strategy. It was about identity. They were tired of being scattered and fighting amongst themselves. They longed for a leader who could bring them together and lead them into the future God had promised. In David, they saw that hope. They recognized that under his leadership, they could finally become the strong, unified nation they were always meant to be. Think about what this meant for David. For years, he had been on the run, hiding in caves, betrayed by his own king. He had been promised the throne by God through the prophet Samuel when he was just a boy, but the path to that throne was long and filled with hardship. Can you imagine the emotion of this moment for him? To see all the tribes, the very people who had previously opposed him, now standing before him, declaring their loyalty and their kinship. It must have been an overwhelming confirmation of God's faithfulness. This story from 1 Chronicles is more than just ancient history. It holds timeless lessons for us today. First, it shows us the incredible power of unity. When people lay down their differences and come together for a common purpose, amazing things can happen. Division weakens, but unity builds. Whether it's in our families, our workplaces, our communities, or even on a global scale, the principle remains the same. Progress and strength are found when we recognize our shared humanity, our bone and flesh connection with one another. Second, it highlights the importance of proven character and leadership. The people didn't flock to David because he was the loudest or the most powerful at the time. They chose him because they had watched his life. They saw his courage, his humility, and his unwavering faith in God through years of trials. He had earned their trust not through words, but through his actions. It's a great reminder that true influence is built on a foundation of integrity. And third, this story speaks volumes about patience and trusting in a bigger plan. David was anointed king as a teenager, but he didn't actually rule over all of Israel until he was 37. That's a long time to wait. He had to endure incredible hardship and uncertainty, but he held on to the promise God had given him. This moment at Hebron was the fulfillment of that long-awaited promise. It teaches us that even when our own journey seems long and difficult, and the promises we're holding on to seem far off, we should not lose hope. There is a timing for everything, and faithfulness in the waiting period is just as important as the final outcome. When the people of Israel declared, "We are your bone and your flesh," they were making a covenant. They were committing to stand with David, to support him, and to build the kingdom together. And what was the result of this unity? The very next verses tell us that David went on to capture Jerusalem, establish it as his capital, and lead Israel into its golden age. The nation became stronger, more prosperous, and more secure than it had ever been. All of this was sparked by that one powerful moment of decision at Hebron. Decision to come together as one. So, as we reflect on this verse, let's ask ourselves, where in our lives can we choose unity over division? Where can we look past our differences and recognize the bone and flesh connection we share with others? Who are the leaders of proven character we can support? And what promises are we patiently waiting for, trusting that in the right time, they will come to pass? The story of David and all of Israel at Hebron is a beautiful picture of reconciliation, hope, and the incredible potential that is unlocked when a people become one. It reminds us that our greatest strength is found not in our individual might, but in our shared identity and purpose. Thanks so much for joining me today to explore this incredible piece of scripture. If this message resonated with you, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We love diving deep into these ancient stories and uncovering the powerful truths they hold for our lives today. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about the power of unity, one that speaks volumes about unity, conflict, and the very foundation of our relationships, communities, and even our own inner lives. It's Matthew 12:25, where Jesus says, "Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand." Now, let's set the scene for this statement. He was in the middle of a confrontation. He had just healed a man who was blind and unable to speak, a miraculous act of compassion. It was a serious, malicious accusation. Just deny it. He dismantles their argument with pure, undeniable logic. He points out the absurdity of their claim. Why would Satan fight against himself? Why would the prince of demons cast out his own demons? The strength of any large group, whether it's a country or a company, comes from a shared vision and a sense of common purpose. When that is lost, decay is almost inevitable. But let's bring it closer to home, to the city or household part of the verse. This is where it gets really personal for most of us. A household divided against itself will not stand. How many of us have seen this play out in families? It becomes a place of stress and conflict. The very foundation of trust and love erodes, and the family unit, which should be our strongest support system, begins to fall apart. It can be unspoken grudges, secrets, or a quiet competition between siblings. It can be parents who present a disunited front to their children, undermining each other's authority. Jesus' words are a stark warning that for a family to thrive, unity is not a luxury. It is an absolute necessity. It requires effort, forgiveness, and a commitment to work through disagreements rather than letting them fester. And now, let's go even deeper, to the most personal level of all, the divided self. Have you ever felt like you're at war with yourself? One part of you wants to be healthy and disciplined, but another part just wants to procrastinate and indulge. One part of you knows you should forgive someone, but another part holds on tightly to anger and hurt. This is an internal divided kingdom.